Welcome to another. Today's topic's about something that's happening right now, but I'm not seeing a lot of news or like follow up on it right now. In a nutshell, they're having the Roe v. Wade case or an abortion case being seen on the Supreme Court right now. So big changes are happening to reproductive rights. So let's talk about it. you it's kind of crazy how we in the United States are a free country, right? We have this idea of freedom and protecting lives, right? And those two ideas right there are in contradiction with this topic, right? We do want to protect the lives of, babies, because babies, right? But then what about the freedoms of women, So it's tough, Like, in a nutshell, we should just let women and doctors talk things out and decide stuff and stay out of it. And I say that as a man, but also as American, right? We will probably never have gun reform in our lifetime, or at least in my lifetime, because it's a freedom, right? Freedom to own, right? It's a right. And the comments against that stuff is like, you can't take away my right. You can't impose on my freedom, right? I have a right to do blah, 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 blah. Yet, when you look at women, do they have a right to care for their bodies? You know what I mean? Like, how messed up is that? Like, how are we to decide what they should do? And a lot of times, too, it's contradictory, like in a historical sense. That's where I come from a lot of this stuff, right? So you have Operation Bootstraps, like where they were legit sterilizing women in Puerto Rico, right? Why were they doing that? I know one of the arguments, I forgot what book I read or article was like the concept of whether poor people shouldn't reproduce because they're just going to stay poor, right? So the government came up with the idea to get them medical treatment by sterilizing them. And that's heartbreaking. But now, with this whole thing happening now, it's like, yo, what the hell? Why are we continually why is it up for debate? You know what I mean? When it shouldn't involve any of us. It should involve the person who's pregnant and the doctor, right? One thing that has increased livelihood across the nations is healthcare, is doctors, and also is prenatal care, right? Which are often offered by Planned Parenthood. And to care for a fetus is more than just holding the baby for 9 months and then popping it out. Like, it's way more complicated than that. And as a man, I don't get it. I can't fully comprehend the toll that takes. The same way I can't comprehend the toll a period takes. Like, I've never had a period. I've never had those cramps. And it was interesting. I think it was a couple weeks ago I was watching this video. It was like this stimulation that gives you the sensation of cramps. And he had men on like level 5, 6, 7. They're like in so much pain. And then you crank it up to like 11, and the women have it on, and they're like, why is it worse than this? Like, you know what I mean? So the audacity of pain. And then that's not even talking about childbirth. That's not even talking about the mental and emotional and physical toll it has on a person who goes through with having a baby, and then the after effects is postpartum. Like, there's bills happening in Florida that have already been passed, in Texas. Let's say, like, the second the baby has a heartbeat, you have to keep it. If you kill it, then you go to jail, right? You get the death penalty. You can do all this other stuff to you. But we have somebody who killed their children and is walking around scot-free. Why do we continue with the argument, or even uphold the argument of like protect life, when we clearly don't care about life? We care about the idea of life. I feel like that's where it comes a lot into play. You have this protection of the baby, but not the protection of the woman. And to me, that's contradictory. That's fucked up. Sorry for the language, but there's no simple way to put it. It's wrong. Like, back off. Like, Texas is so quick to come up with abortion laws and also allow everyone to walk around with a handgun. So once that baby is born, it can be shot. Because we had our babies killed in Sandy Hook, and we don't want to act on anything, because nothing has changed since then to now. Yet when women are raped, we're forcing them to have a baby. And I get that I understand that's like a hypothetical, but that's also a reality for a lot, you know? Like, I know, like, in school, like, we all watched and read, like, The Color Purple, right? The trauma and pain is only starting to rise to the surface and be acknowledged. And you want to care about the babies, what about the missing indigenous women? What about missing children? The whole strings and dark realms of prostitution and pornography and also all this other stuff, right? I think a very interesting documentary I watched was the Rashida Jones thing on, like, porn. I think it was like After Porn or something like that. It was an interesting documentary, but you're seeing how these infamous porn stars are making hundreds and hundreds of movies, and they only last in the industry for like less than a year, for the most part. And there's so much trauma and pain in the before, during, and after. How much pain are we willing to codify for women to go through beyond the already immoral sociological trauma that women go through? And if we're going to hold women accountable to be arrested, why not hold the man accountable? Why not hold the person whose seed gets planted, right? And I'm huge into wrestling, as you can see the wrestling show right now by Britt Baker. Freaking bloody genius, in my opinion. But, well, another favorite wrestler of mine is The Miz. And people know him from the real world, and I've seen him from there and actually achieve the WWE dream. And he has his own TV show now, reality show again. But it's about how he got a vasectomy, because him and his wife made a decision to no longer have kids. So he goes through with the vasectomy. And then poof, problem solved for the most part. And even when I watched Scrubs, one of my favorite TV shows ever, one of the main characters, Dr. Cox, after they had kids, gets a vasectomy. And ironic, TV show, gets it reversed and done again and reversed and then done again. But that shows you that it's reversible. And even so, If a man were to decide, I do want kids later on, they can freeze some sperm now and then have kids later. Like, is the abortion law about protecting the fetus, or is it about protecting the ball sack? Like, let's be real. Like, we're already pushing overpopulation in the context of finite space and finite materials and finite everything. Yet, we want to force everyone to have kids. Most women don't even find out they're pregnant until after 6 weeks. Yet, if you decide, oh shit, I don't want to have this baby, or this pregnancy is not going to be viable for the baby or for myself, I have to go through with it. So they're basically legally saying, have this baby and die. That's okay. And when this baby is born with you dead, it'll go into foster care and suffer and grow up without you. So who are we truly protecting in this law? You're not asking the baby's opinions. They don't even talk yet. They're not even a thought in this scenario. And how heartbreaking is it that even too, we have so many people in our age group. Like right now, I'm 28, and I don't see kids in my future for at least another batch of years. You know, I'm still single, so that's not happening anytime soon. So, what's happening there? People are getting older and older, and then when they finally decide to have kids, in some scenarios, they can't. But adoption gets pushed to the side because all these kids that you're going to be forced to be born, even if the mother dies, in that scenario, what happens to the kids? It goes back into the state. And some states actually make money off that, which is crazy. Like the fact that you have kids in childcare, or in childcare in these group homes and stuff, the state makes money off of them. And when that kid turns 18, good luck, buddy, because then you're out of the system. And all that money that was made to care for you, they don't see a dime of it. So in reality, I would like to ask, watching this far, if you care about life, pass gun reform. If you care about life, pass low rent. If you care about life, pass free healthcare. And we're not even like thinking about the considerations of the expenses that pregnancies are, because most in today's world are born in a hospital. Hospitals ain't cheap. You're talking about a couple $1,000s just to give birth safely. And then all the child care that comes immediately after, because the kids got to get their shots. And yes, get the vaccine. And the reason you do that is to protect the kids from polio and whooping cough and all this other stuff. Chicken pox, hopefully. So what are these abortion bills really saying, you know? Like, why should we mandate women's bodies? Why is that a debate? Why not include the men's bodies? Why not include the opinion of the fetus? Because you can't. But you can't have the opinion of the person who is pregnant. You can't have the opinion of the doctors who can tell you if this is going to be viable or not. And that's where I think it should stay. If I was in a situation, this is hypothetical, because thankfully I was never in the situation, fingers crossed, where I'm with someone or not with someone and they get pregnant. What are the options? If this was like 10 years ago, let's see, barely out of high school, have no job, I'm already living in poverty, What can I offer? Even today, I'm in a huge amount of debt. I live in the middle of nowhere. How much stress would it put on the person immediately, given the realities of this world, the expense of freedom, right? And in some cases, in a lot of cases, in these conversations that I've heard and even I've had, and even in this hypothetical, is like, I'm not ready to have kids. I'm not financially stable or anything for that responsibility, right? Like, oh, if you're responsible enough to have sex, but shut the fuck up. Like, you don't even teach sex education correctly. Because if you taught sex education, people could be better educated on how to safely protect themselves, even before the act, right? And then we have to also include the concept of the psychological trauma that is love, right? Because we're all taught from kids, oh, if they're mean to you, they like you. That's bullshit. They're just assholes, right? Like, why stop associating mean or being rude as interest, right? So now you're not teaching sex education. You're not teaching psychological or mental health. You're not providing healthcare. You're not providing anything that can make it into not even a viable pregnancy, a viable community. Pass laws to help the community, so if and when that child is born, they can thrive and move forward with their lives, right? Because you want to protect their lives until they're born. Because once they're born, not one essence has shown to care, right? We had an insurrection, and you've also voted not to look into it. Like, what is the message you're truly sending? You're pandering to these one issue pundits, right? And to me, that's sad and disrespectful to the entire context of discourse. Because, and it's frustrating too. I've met people and talked to people with like, they're like one issue type of voters. Like, if they're for abortion, I'm not voting for them. You don't even hear the rest of their policies. You're stuck up on one issue that it may be the most important thing to you. But the reality is, that's not how this country is meant to run, because we have compromise. You're not supposed to like every little thing, right? But you have to find that common ground. And when you don't, you have an insurrection. When you don't, you have a civil war. When you don't, you're living in an apartheid. How disgusting is it to we keep regulating and mandating and pushing the boundaries against women and not for women? And I think the image that stuck with me the most in this topic was having Abbott, the governor of Texas, sign this bill, the heartbeat bill, whatever, surrounded by white men who, I would love an investigative journalist to go off and interview and dig up on every person in that room, how many abortions they forced their mistresses or girlfriends or wives to have. You know, like, what the fuck? You're making it into a two-tier society because one group can still get those abortions, you know, and the other group cannot. Is that a society we want to live in, where one side is regulated and the other can do whatever the hell they want because they have the resources? That's not equality. That's not freedom. That's not freedom on an equal landing, you know? And it's heartbreaking, personally. Wait, British shirt in there. Like I have a niece, and I'm so freaking proud of her, and I'm grateful she has never gotten pregnant, to my knowledge. But even as a little girl, I worried about those things, and I'm only like what 9 years older than her, so like, you know, like, that's not much. Here I am at 9 years old, at 10 years old, 11 years old, thinking about when she starts dating, if she'll ever be wronged or touched or like, these are the thoughts no teenagers should be having. But when you love somebody and you know the world we live in, it's these realities that set you back, that terrify you, that emphasize a desire to create change and to protect women, to give them the power that they were so wrongly denied for generations, for centuries, right? And I even think about my mother. And I know this story was told in hate or in anger, but when we talked about it afterwards, years later, it's kind of powerful, right? But the essence of it is a choice. So, long story short, I got in huge trouble in school, and I got suspended or whatever. And my mom was so angry with me. And in a nutshell, she told me a story of how people in her life wanted her to have an abortion when she was pregnant with me. And she made the decision, no, I'm going to have this child. I'm going to love this child. I'm going to raise this child to be a great person. And that's where the story came in, like kind of that parenting. Well, that's another talk, like we'll talk about later. Like, I don't think she should have done that. It's kind of fucked up. But she had a lot of powerful entities in her life pushing her to have an abortion. And she decided not to. And here I am today. Am I grateful for that decision? Yes, because I wouldn't be here. But more importantly, that's not an easy decision to make. And then later, when we talked about it after the fact and kind of reflected on it, I reflected on how terrifying of a decision that had to have been. Right? It's not easy to decide not to give life, right? It's not easy to decide to have a kid and go through it. You know what I mean? Like, give in the circumstances that you're already in. Like, I grew up in poverty. Imagine how much better financially, and this kind of messed up. This is where my brain went at the time when me and my mom talked about it. We talked about it. And she's like, you know, it's kind of funny. She kind of chuckled, like, yeah, probably. Because, like, if I wasn't around, my brother and sister would have probably lived in a better financial standpoint growing up. Because I wouldn't have been around. You know, it's expensive raising kids. And she said, I think the one comment she made at the end is like, I'm so grateful. Sorry. I'm grateful, and I know in my heart I made the right decision. You know? And here she was, I think it was like 20 years later from whenever that thought happened or decision happened. I was 20 when we had that conversation. And here she is reflecting on the pride she felt in her son, who in that moment was in college and self-sufficient, and also helping her out financially and stuff like that. There was that sense of pride there. Now, that's not an easy decision to make, to have a kid or not have a kid. But imagine she was forced to have me and did not have that option or choice. Right? That denial of freedom. Would I still be born under that law? Yeah, technically. But will we have had that same relationship or that conversation of reflecting on the power of that choice? No. Because it would have been forced. You know? It also projects this image of this idea of freedom being denied. And when you're denied something, you rebel, right? Is that constant, like, apple of Eden, right? Don't eat the apple. They ate the apple. when you're told not to do something, people are more likely to do it. Like that's psychology type of stuff, you know? So instead of investing in criminalizing a woman's choice that's made between her and a doctor, how about you A, include the man and hold them accountable for planting that seed, and B, create a viable community for that child to be raised in. Because every baby born right now, today, because people are born every day, in the United States, is now living in a country where an insurrection happened on our capital and nothing's being done about it or investigated into it. We have intense poverty and a pandemic, which people don't believe in. We have rent sky high. We have a $7.25 minimum wage federally. We have poisoned water in Flint and actually everywhere because lead. We have failing infrastructure. We have collapsing bridges. We have out of date textbooks. We have a wrecked school system. But we have a plane on Mars. I implore you, if you watch this far, I implore you to pay attention to this trial. Because before Trump left office, he got a majority conservative Supreme Court, in which they are meant to be unbiased, by the way. But that's never true. And they are going to be hearing a case that can essentially overturn Roe v. Wade. And legalize the denial of a woman's right to choose. I ask you to keep tabs on that. And keep tabs on your local governments, because I thought it was over with Trump being out. And it's interesting how they waited until now to pass all these laws. It's like a testing of the waters, you know? But pay attention to your states or localities that are passing these anti-women laws, basically. Because they're only targeted towards women. And even in that, isn't that like a civil rights case or an equality case? You know what I mean? Like, you're not charging the man who raped. You're not charging the man who got the girl pregnant. You're not charging the grown man who got the child pregnant. You're not, you know what I mean? Like, you're not having the two people involved who made that child a thing involved in this law. You're only targeting the one who's holding the baby. So men, take responsibility, support, and shut the fuck up. And women, let your voices be heard. This is going to be a tough year, and I'm hoping for the best in this case, but we'll keep tabs on it. We'll hope for the best, and this is pure evidence of laws can change. My gun rights activist, laws can change. But wrongs must be rectified. And have a conversation with the women in your life. I think one of the heart-wrenching conversations I've had in my lifetime is the understanding of How many people in my life have had abortions or have contemplated it or had miscarriages, and how heart-drenching that is, and the emotional trauma in that. There are a lot of people in your lives who've gone through that pain alone, and the biggest person who was there for them in that situation was the doctor. The further you look into this, deeper it goes, and the pain, it's heartbreaking. But listen, pay attention, and if you don't believe the woman should have the right to choose, who the fuck are you?